Alrighty, this is a brand new format. This is me, myself, and I talking to the camera, presenting some slides, talking about a topic that I'm either fascinated by, going deep into, or something I've learned. And hopefully you find this useful. Today we're going to talk all about agentic commerce. It feels like a bit of a buzzword that people are starting to get familiar with, and with the likes of agent mode becoming more of a promising technology across ChatGPT and all these other tools. Agentic commerce is something that we'll see come to fruition and get bigger because it's already here, get bigger and more valuable to both consumers and to brands pretty quickly because that game is starting to shift and it's basically happening now. And what do we mean by agentic commerce? I suppose in its simplest form, it's really around where the AI is basically doing the work for you in effect. So it's not just looking for products, but it's negotiating on your behalf. It's assessing different products online, and it then goes through with the transaction for you, which could be delegated by you, could be overseen by you, could be autonomous without you even knowing. There are many ways that this is going to manifest, and it's really shaking up the space. And this is a very different concept to e-commerce, which we'll talk about in a second. And I think it's helpful to start with an example, to make it real. So imagine you're chatting with your partner about hosting a dinner party and you're talking through the menu, and ChatGPT just, perks up and it starts to pick up the context. It knows your dietary preferences. It remembers where you've eaten with your friends before, and it knows that you guys like Thai. It has access to your fridge through IoT, the Internet of Things, and it knows what products you have in there and what you don't have. It's able to then compare prices for products across supermarkets or other stores. So say you decide we're going to get Thai green curry and you really like the meat from the butcher down the road, but you need all the ingredients from Countdown and you want some really nice red wine to go with it. And ChatGPT also knows that Greg and Jenny, who you usually dine with, don't like red, they like white. Goes out to Glengarry, finds a really nice white. And this could all happen without you opening a single browser tab. It can go find all those products, put them into a cart for you, and then even execute that purchase and organize the delivery to arrive the next day. So that cuts out not only the process that we go through of going around all these websites, finding prices, comparing them, delivery charges, credit card payments, whatever it is. This all happens autonomously and is all just through a conversation at the end of the day. And that's not some far off science fiction. And as I say, we see it with Agentic agent mode at the moment within ChatGPT. I can go and add products to cart. I bought some batteries for a lawnmower the other day without visiting the website and without even knowing what type of batteries I needed for the lawnmower. I told it to go have a look at forums, find the ones I needed, find the best type, put it into a cart, and basically it presented me with a checkout to pay. We're not quite at that point yet where it's ubiquitous to have AI purchase on your behalf, but they will find the product, they will send it to cart, they will do that transaction that is being built. We'll talk about the infrastructure of how that's coming together. I suppose the reason it's so important is that this is, for commerce especially, is the biggest structural change we've seen since e-commerce first arrived. And it's not just retailers who are going to be affected by this, because commerce doesn't just mean purchasing, like spending money through a terminal in store or through an e-com platform. Commerce means a range of things. Commerce could be, to some brands, getting a lead or a sign up. There's different parts of commerce, right? It's a very broad topic. So that same shift of what we're moving towards, where agents are operating on behalf of us to find information, compare notes, negotiate, will apply to B2B, to B2C. It'll apply to old school accounting firms that rely on referrals and that top 50 firm badge that they win every year. It'll affect the manufacturer who, their business is built on RFPs or RFQs coming into their inbox. It'll of course impact high street retailers, New Zealand, Australia, globally. So there is a massive change that's coming for the commerce world, which largely every company who has a website, in fact, has to think about, because you're having to reconsider what is the purpose of my website. It doesn't go away. Let's just be really clear about that. There's a lot of chatter in the market around what is the value of a website. The role of the website changes. It almost becomes, how do you build a website for humans to engage with, but also for agents to engage with? And that process, infrastructure, design thinking changes dramatically when you're building for an agent. And we'll talk about what some of that means as we go through this conversation. But really, the interface of business is moving from human-led navigation, let's say. So I found website in Google, I browsed the site, I filled out a form perhaps, to much more agent-led execution, which is I told my assistant or my agent what I needed and it shortlisted something for me, or it didn't. And I think that's the really important delineation, is that if you're not structured so an agent can understand, if your website isn't structured in such a way that it can't read your website, it can't understand it, it can't advocate for you by giving recommendations back to the human, if that's part of the process, you won't be surfaced. You won't be in contention, which means that you won't be contacted or purchased from. So there's a lot to consider as part of that process. But I suppose we're still early in the market. Let's be really clear on that. I believe today, I think it's $6 trillion is spent through at the moment, e-commerce online. And we're talking about an agentic commerce market growing from, I think, 136 billion this year to 1.7 trillion in 5 years. So that's 25% of where e-com is today in terms of the value. But you think about that growth curve, that's a CAGR or compounded annual growth rate of 67-70% per year, which is mad. That's also at the lower end of the market of some of the valuations or expectations that are coming in. You've got, I think it's McKinsey, who they believe that number's more likely to hit $3 trillion in the US alone, with 5 trillion globally or something like that by 2030. So there's a lot happening in this space. We're also seeing in the research that consumers are expecting and hearing from their customers that they are more willing to purchase if they've had AI or an agent as part of the decision-making process. There's also some really strong research out there to show that customers arriving through an agent show 2 to 6 times higher purchase intent than traditional channels when they've come through. So they're coming through with a higher intent, they're better researched, they're more willing to buy, whatever that means. That could be a purchase or to sign up for something or download a white paper, whatever it may mean. So there's a massive amount of work that needs to be done to build the infrastructure around how we facilitate agentic commerce moving forward. Because if you think about how this works, we're now having to put a lot more trust into AI agents with some new personal information, credit card details, other aspects to fulfill that transaction. And that's not what today's infrastructure was built for. Today, if I want to make a credit card purchase, my stored credentials for my credit card are in Google AutoPay or Google Payments, whatever it's called. And that's secure, it's fairly secure, but that's not cryptographically secure as what it sort of needs to be. So what we're going to see is quite a big shift in what needs to happen in the finance sector and the tech sector, how we engage online and how we get used to effectively what is happening in this space, and what those new payment rails will need to be and what the infrastructure will need to be so that we can facilitate what agentic commerce has in terms of promises moving forward. Because if you think about it today, the human is in the loop for every process. We add the product to cart, we do all sorts of things around adding our own payment details, we then hit payment or pay as well. We're often sending out authentication messages through 2FA or MFA to make sure that we're proving that it is us. But as I say, when an agent is in the middle of that process, how do we ensure that the agent is acting on the best wishes or the intent of the human? How do we verify that the agent isn't going rogue? How do we verify that the agent isn't malicious or there isn't a bad actor controlling that agent? And as I say, today's systems will start to break, and they already were. They're not even built for it. They just weren't designed for that future. So we're seeing two major protocols basically being stood up, and those protocols have been built by Google and then by OpenAI. There are a number of other protocols being built up as well, but the masses are coalescing around the two major players in the AI space. And it's pretty clear as to why Google and OpenAI are going after that space. If you think about it, where does the transaction happen? It's not going to continue to happen on a business's website. It's now going to happen through ChatGPT, or it's going to happen through Google's Gemini, because Google Gemini is becoming the biggest second horse in that race. They've got I think it's 600 billion active users a month at the moment, which is pretty good considering where they were a year ago. Gemini wasn't on anyone's radar, whereas ChatGPT, as we know, has close to 1 billion weekly active users, and we know more and more that they're partnering up with Shopify and Stripe around their Agentic Commerce Agentic Commerce Protocol, ACP. And they're letting the likes of Booking.com and Coursera and all these other partners build on their infrastructure, which is where the transaction is going to happen. So what I'm saying there is Google and OpenAI are going to be fighting for where the transaction happens to clip the ticket, because that's where the value is, that's where the data gets collected. This is the new battleground for these players to make sure that they become the go-to for shopping. So they're building out these protocols. These protocols are basically infrastructure whereby a merchant or a brand or a website would build their website in such a way that it can talk to these protocols and prove this is what my products are, this is why the agent or the human should buy from me, here's all the information about how we operate, our shipping, our service details, our T's and C's, all the rest of it, our returns policy, all those bits and pieces. That is what the agent will be looking for. And it'll interface with both the protocol built by the Googles or the OpenAIs of the world, and the other parts or layers of the infrastructure as well. But the challenge with this new protocol is that, as I say, we have these new challenges to overcome. Google's built its Agentic Payments Protocol, or AP2 protocol, to basically become an infrastructure to support agentic commerce. They've identified what they call the 3 A's, which are fundamental to how we build trust in an agentic commerce world. And so the first one is authorization, which is basically can you prove that me, the user, the human, actually gave specific permission for a transaction to happen and gave that permission to an agent. So it's not just some vague go shop for me sometime, and that's where they're coining this phrasing around verified intent, not inferred action. So verified intent is I gave authorization and it's been stamped somewhere, it's in a immutable record that no one can dispute because I've signed it off cryptographically speaking, that is the intent I gave to the agent. And so that could be anything from the items I wanted, the merchant I wanted to buy from, perhaps the brand, the price ceiling, any other constraints. So let's put that into context. We might say, back to the dinner party idea, I want you to go buy my chicken and some wine and all the other stuff I need for Thai green curry, but I need this to be purchased today so that it's delivered tomorrow. By the time it hits midnight, no purchase happens because I have set those constraints or those parameters which the agent must abide by. And so that leads us into the second A, which is authenticity. Does the agent's request really match the user's original intent? So did you ask for a decent mid-range laptop? Or was it 2 kgs worth of chicken or 1 kg worth of chicken? Or did the agent decide to try and buy a shitty laptop, or it bought beef instead of chicken, whatever it is, because the model got confused, because it hallucinates it. It's got errors, whatever. It might even be manipulated by someone if it's hasn't been built properly, for example. So we need a secure link between what the human wanted and what the agent actually did. That's kind of that verifiable path that we need to lock in. And that leads us to the third A, which is accountability. So when something goes wrong, who is responsible? Because there are a lot of parties in this process. You've got the human, you've got the merchant, you've got the merchant's bank, the payment services provider, you've got OpenAI, Google, you've got delivery, you've got all the layers of the payments process as part of that, and not to mention the tech stack that's facilitating this arrangement as well. And so Who is responsible there? Is it the person who set the budget, the company that built the agent? As I say, is it the retailer or the payment network? And without a clean audit trail showing who did what and when, no one is going to be able to support autonomous payments at scale. We're not going to solve this, the 3A's, which basically formulate solving the problem around trust, which is absolutely critical to this space. And we'll end up with this crazy fragmented ecosystem where every player is building their own closed protocol system. You've got risk and procurement and legal teams panicking. Agentic commerce just won't take off. And let's think about a really serious example. Imagine a shipping container comes in and it's been sorted by agentic commerce. You think about it, a shipping boat, I should say. All those containers on the boat, those are owned by different companies as part of the logistics supply chain. You've got products and crates and pallets and all sorts within each container. More parties are involved. There are so many hands that are touching the documentation that's being used throughout that supply chain, insurance providers. It's messy. And you can just imagine if one thing goes wrong, how do we make sure that whole process we have an audit trail of what went wrong, who did what, and why. So yeah, that's at a very kind of high level, sort of enterprise level, let's say. Then you've got it at the more consumer level, which is I wanted to buy Pizza Hut and KFC and McDonald's for a flat of 5 people. We paid with one transaction. The payments were distributed to each of the suppliers, the providers of the meals, and my McDonald's didn't come, or it was cold. Okay, cool. So what happened? Was Uber involved for delivery? Is it McDonald's fault? Is it something to do with the payment processor that the payment didn't get transacted fast enough and something happened in that process which slowed this whole thing down? There are a lot of considerations as part of how that supply chain works. So there are a few massive changes, I suppose, as well. And just to kind of go back a step, we'll talk a bit more about how the technology works as well. But some people will still be asking, how does this differ to e-commerce? And I suppose just to make it really, really clear, with agentic commerce, firstly, we've got delegation of authority. In classic e-com, you drive every step of the process. You click, you compare, you add to cart, you confirm, you buy. In agentic commerce, you're full hands off. You say, keep my household supplies and toiletries stocked, and I'll make orders when things are running low, or find the best noise cancelling headphones under $300 with really good reviews and buy them. The agent handles all that research, the comparisons, the vendor selection, negotiation. We just define the goal and the guardrails, and it figures out the rest. The second piece and how it delivers to e-com is that we would buy with one merchant at a time. So I would go buy from Cotton On for socks, and I'd go to Barker's for a top, and I'd go to Rod and Gun for a jacket. I don't know. I'd have to do that one by one. Now I can go with one purchase, multiple vendors, multiple agent orchestration, which means that e-com was completely siloed, one website at a time, whereas agentic commerce runs in the background in what we call the invisible marketplace. So I'm talking to ChatGPT, I'm just typing into my chat box. There is a whole infrastructure behind the scenes that I'm not aware of. I can probably get the agent to show me some of it, but it's routing information and checking websites. There's tons of stuff going on that I'm not going to see. So agentic commerce is basically running across multiple websites. Everything is it's running in parallel, I should say, with multiple agents performing their tasks, looking at delivery times and my loyalty points. What are the opportunities? Regional stock, perhaps, different payment options. And then coordinating that final purchase across multiple vendors, but with one transaction for me. So I don't have to think, I don't have to worry about all of that. The third piece, which is most interesting around agentic commerce, is this idea of contextual conversational behavior. So the agent doesn't just go out and find a product, right? ChatGPT knows a ton about me, or Gemini knows a lot about me as well through being connected to my calendar, my email, my workspace, possibly some conversations, meeting transcripts. And so they have all this context and understanding of me. So I might say, go out and find me 3 new white t-shirts, and I may not give any more specificity around brand or what I want, but it might know from my life and what I've told it, where I live, so it knows the conditions I live within. It might know that I bike to work, so I might need something that is breathable because I want to put on the white t-shirt in the morning. It's, I'm still a bit warm. It might know that if I'm into sustainability or not, all those bits and pieces. So the agent will have all that context to make decisions that align with what I'm into. And that's where it becomes really interesting if we go back to what does it mean for the brand? How do you show up online to align with people's values and what's important to them? Because AI can read what a brand means online. Can it really determine that you're a sustainable brand? Can it really determine that the business engages in ethical practices to produce its clothing, for example? Is that explicit on the website, or is it inherent within like a marketing message that a human understands the nuance of, and they can see the images and they can feel it, the emotiveness of that? But an agent isn't a human. It reads code at the end of the day. So we need to be more direct and more objective and more black and white about what our brand and our business stands for and how we operate. So there's a lot to think about there. And I guess there are different ways that'll come to light. But I think let's get into more of the technical piece. And so what we were talking about, ACP and AP2, the Agentic commerce protocols from Google. Google's AP2 is the Google Agent Payments Protocol. Their focus is on building a trust and permission layer, which means that it's open source. It's backed by a broad coalition. I think they've got 60 partners or so. They've partnered with Visa, MasterCard. I think PayPal's on there. Worldline, payment service provider, even services businesses like Salesforce, Intuit. So they're basically trying to build an open network to say, come and build on our payments protocol. We'll help you interface with customers moving forward, and we'll make this a single protocol that you want to build on. You don't need to go and build for multiple different protocols to be able to interface. But their goal is really around is to become the universal cryptographic spine for agent payments. So, and they work in this concept of mandates, which I'll show you in a second. Then you've got the other side of the coin, which is the ACP, Agentic Commerce Protocol. As we mentioned, this is OpenAI's basket, and they partnered with Stripe to build this. It's basically the execution and checkout layer inside of ChatGPT. So if AP2 is focused on, we want to build the payment rails for anyone to transact in any way, whether it be through crypto, credit card, payment, points, through loyalty programs, I'm not entirely sure. There's all sorts of ways you could pay these days, right? They're focused on making that as easy as possible for merchants or for businesses to engage with their customers. ACP is more about, we're going to make shopping super easy for the customer, which means that they're going to make it really easy for retailers and merchants to basically bring their checkout layer or their shopping experience into ChatGPT or similar type interfaces, because the ChatGPT experience won't just be within ChatGPT. You might be able to load that on your website, for example. So ACP focuses on things like rendering the checkout natively in the AI conversation experience. They have this concept of shared payment tokens, or SPT, which involves a heavy cryptographic kind of flow of basically taking payment credentials from the buyer, wrapping it up, tokenizing it, sending it to the merchant. Merchant unwraps it and passes it to the payment services provider. As part of that process, there are all the fraud signals in there to make sure that payments are as they should be. They're above board. Make sure all the right payment credentials are in there, but also ensuring that only the right amount of information is actually shared with the merchant. We shouldn't overshare credit card details, etc. That checking will need to be done by the payment services provider and all the rest of it as well. But the ACP framework or protocol is about making agentic commerce as close to plug-and-play as possible for businesses, and really standardizing how agents and merchants will exchange information, whether it be product SKUs or pricing or order data. So that's where that concept of me as a brand, as a website, my website needs to be set up to interface with these agents. Whereas, in contrast to ACP or Google's Agentic Commerce Protocol, their philosophy is don't rebuild your payment stack. Let's just let agents plug into it. We'll help figure that out with you. It's almost similar to what, I guess, Apple Pay first did on mobile for brands, making it as seamless as possible to transact. So they are competing initiatives. They're being driven by the two biggest players. They are really focused on, they're two separate approaches for sure. They're trying to solve a similar problem, but because we're so new to market, it seems like they're completely competing. I'd say we're going to move to a world where we either have a macro protocol that lives across both and that becomes the standard, or maybe both will coexist and businesses will have to build for both protocols to make it work. Maybe one suits a business more than the other. But the key is going to be interoperability. How do you just make sure that this is as easy as possible for websites and brands to plug into these protocols to be able to transact? I'm going to go back a slide because this is really important. Mandates. So one way that these protocols will begin to solve for the trust and the proof points that we've been talking about, the 3 A's again, how do we solve that trust problem? Mandates have been proposed by the Google team at driving AP2 as a way to solve for that. So a mandate is basically a cryptographically signed, tamper-proof digital contract that says this user, this human, gave an agent permission to take these actions under these conditions using this payment method, credit card, crypto, whatever, within this particular time frame. So that's that cart mandate, effectively. So you can think of mandates, and that's just an example, but you can think of mandates as verifiable credentials that anchor the identity, the intent, the responsibility around the process. And sorry, I said cart mandates, that's actually the intent mandate. So these are all around, if the human isn't present, what are the actions that the agent should take in future? They should go and buy shoes, they should be size 10, they should be from the US only, they should be this brand, that brand. If they're above $150, forget it. And so different intents could come together for, you might think about buying music tickets when they become available, or you might go to buy a product in store and you say, I want a lawnmower from Still, for example. They may say, we don't have any lawnmowers from Still right now. You go, great. Well, I'm going to set off my agent that when stock comes back when there is stock back in the inventory system, I want you to buy the lawnmower, provided it doesn't exceed $500 and provided this is not more than 6 months into the future. So that's the concept of the human's intent is captured as a verifiable credential cryptographically, which would be secure and it's immutable and no one can challenge it because it's been captured. The second mandate, and this is around the wrong way on the slides, is the cart mandate. That's capturing the final confirmation of a specific purchase. So we're actually going through the purchase process here, making sure that the transaction has been captured. And the cart mandate really is there to give proof to the merchant around how this transaction should happen from a payment perspective. And then the third piece is the payment mandate. So this carries the context about the transaction itself around the payment rails so that issuers in the network know what's going on. And coming back to that accountability piece, we can follow through and say, what happened? Was there any fraudulent behavior? If so, what was it? And the payment mandate is really around understanding that, checking a lot of that, running the different processes around, it could be around KYA, know your agent. So running that check to make sure that the payment coming through is correct, it's coming from the right person, it's gone through any anti-money laundering checks it needs to go through. It's all above board, basically. So this is all around, coming back to the 3 A's, this is AP2's way to use these mandates to solve the 3 A's. So authorization, it's solved because the mandate proves the consumer's permission was given through the intent. The authenticity A is solved because the mandate proves that the agent's behavior matches the authorized intent. That's the cart mandate. Did it match what the agent ended up putting in the cart, for example? And again, the accountability is solved because the audit trail links each step back to the responsible party. So how does this play out in day-to-day? I guess let's just make a really simple example. These are for classic, like, I'm here to shop. You or your agent's building a cart. When you're happy, your phone or your laptop signs a cart mandate that locks in the exact items, the price, the currency, the destination. So from your point of view, it might feel similar to hitting an Apple Pay or a Google Pay confirm button, but under the hood, it's more than a checkbox. It's a cryptographically bound record of the final state of that purchase. And then the intent mandate are where things get interesting because they power the autonomous buying in your absence. So with an intent mandate, you delegate that authority to your agent with 3 critical components. One is around your shopping intent, so the rules, the criteria, the decision logic that you take, things like constraints, price limits, allowed substitutes, the brand preferences perhaps. And then your second piece is around what are the authorized payment methods. That could be cards, bank accounts, wallets, crypto again. What are the rails the agent is allowed to use? And then the number 3 is around TTL, or time to live. So that's the hard expiration on the permission that you've given out. So you might say, as I say, tickets in Chicago to see someone, $200, seats together, only if they become available in 24 hours. That's that intent mandate. Whereas the time to live, or TTL, is that safety valve that stops the same instruction being used 3 weeks later at 10 times the price for a different show. Cool. But I think, the big takeaway here is that it's not just that AI agents will shop for you, it's that the plumbing of global commerce is really being rebuilt. Everything around auditability, verification, delegation, and this isn't about just producing better chatbots, it's about building a really secure, cryptographically backed rule book or ledger that we can monitor, and that's where those mandates on top of protocols become really important. And that's why we've got the likes of Stripe reportedly putting more than 100 people on the ACP project with OpenAI. It's why Google has rallied with more than 60 partners around AP2. They're not treating this as some bolt-on minor feature. They're building a new segment of the internet and that financial infrastructure, which means that, what does that mean for brands? There is a lot of conversation around data with AI, and that could not be more important when it comes to agentic agentic commerce. It's all around having the right platforms. So platforms need accurate, structured data and catalogs from their merchant or their service provider, which they can either pull that data by crawling a brand's website, or they can consume it because you push them rich feeds which they can basically inhale as part of the cache. It also means that we've got a whole new discipline emerging, as we all know, around generative engine optimization, which is basically, how do I make my products and services agent or machine readable and agent selectable? So there's a lot to be thinking about, from what do I need to do with my product data feeds? How do I make sure that my APIs on my website are accessible and open to as many of these protocols and websites and agents as possible? Because without making this as easy as possible for an agent, the agent's going to knock on the door of your website or your database and say, too hard, can't read it, data's not clean, don't know what it means, and I'm just going to move on, basically. So making sure that, one, you're exposing API endpoints that agent protocols can use to talk to your backend, do a catalog search, pricing, availability, cart building, payment submissions. Like for ACP, you need to be able to respond cleanly to a ChatGPT initiated checkout. There's a whole infrastructure that needs to be built around that. For AP2 style flows, you need to be able to receive and handle mandates and payment metadata. That's a whole new build that is just coming to life and emerging now. You'll even have to, I would imagine, at some point, publish something like a merchant agent card, which is almost like a passport for an agent, let's say, which is a description of it's actually a passport for your systems, just essentially a description of what your systems can do for agents. Can they support payments, loyalty, subscriptions? And what actions can you support the agent with? Is it around search catalog? Is it price quoting? Is it reserving inventory? And what data you're both willing to share, right? That's how agents know you exist and what they can do with you. So that communication has to come through via code, basically. And then on the mandate side, you technically ready to generate, receive, store, validate mandates as verifiable credentials, and how long do you store those for? There's all those types of questions and this new infrastructure that needs to be built basically to facilitate agentic commerce. So building for the protocols is basically a preparatory exercise that most businesses are going to need to go through. I've kind of alluded to GEO, but I suppose just to go back on that for one sec, that's the data transformation piece around what does my website look like behind the scenes. So we're moving from SEO to GEO and I guess expanding on what that means, because agents don't browse like humans. They filter on constraints and code. They're not going to be reading the visual look and feel of the website or the aesthetics. They're not going to be reading the marketing information. They're going to be looking for objective, precise, informed information. So that means that we need our entire product and service catalogs. They need to be available via APIs. That means that agents can assess them and make rational choices based on what they've been guided by their human or the context they have. And that brings into question a lot of the product feeds that we see in particular around what are the specifics I need about my product within my database and my catalog. Like getting very granular. All that information about, let's just use a laptop as a good example, like the RAM, the CPU, the weight, dimensions, materials, compliance ratings, warranty, like that's just hygiene layer. And all that needs to be available on the surface for the agent to find. And even the operational data, like the real-time inventory, delivery windows, total costs, returns, the age, region restrictions, like that's where the live data feed connectivity between ERP, inventory management, all sorts of systems needs to basically be cleaned up if it isn't already for a lot of these brands. There's a lot to be thinking about here around data and APIs, and a lot of this will seem technical to some and very elementary to others. But we also need to be thinking about other areas as a marketing function, which might be typically we put out offers, and our offers were 2 for 200 or whatever it might be, and that all sounds good and well, but we need to be more specific when it comes to advising agents on what those offers mean. Those promotions, those bundles, loyalty rules, let's say, or warranty rules, that can't just be marketing copy anymore. This needs to be expressed as logic that an agent can understand. $10 off if delivered by Friday, double loyalty points if the basket contains at least one eco-friendly product. Like that has to be codified in a kind of new way that most teams don't really think about today or don't apply in their execution on their website, nor if they needed to be honest. But effectively, if the agent can't fully understand or compare an offer, it will just filter out that person. It's a new kind of abandonment that they're coining agent abandonment. So we've got cart abandonment, we've got agent abandonment, which means you disappear before the customer even knows you exist. Or maybe they put you into their quote unquote cart and then started to run through that final checklist and thought, hang on, you don't meet the criteria. So those real-time feeds become really important around all the information around an offer and the inventory and data and all the rest of it. So I think another interesting angle to be considering is what type of brand are you? And I'm going to talk about retailers specifically for now. So not every retail brand shows up online the same. Not every merchant shows up online the same. Some are D2C, some are retail plus ecom, some are purely ecom, some are retail, some are distribution, some are suppliers. And so I bucket it into discovery brands and destination brands. You're a discovery brand where people come to you to find other products. PB Tech's a great one. You come to PB Tech and you try and find a particular type of laptop. And your role there is to facilitate an experience and help people with discovery. that's a very different prospect moving forward, where you're just now another layer in the food chain, so to speak, where an agent has to filter through your information. So does that mean that you're now competing with the suppliers of the product you're selling? Because the agent could just go direct to their website, and of course there is all the relationship and business model aspects to be considering here, but I'm using it as an example. Technically you could be competing with the supplier at the end of the day. Whereas if you think about a destination brand, slightly different. I'm going to go to Z every time because I have my loyalty card, or I go to New World, same again, because I get X, Y, and Z. I fly in New Zealand because of air points, whatever it is. Those have different prospects, because when I think about a destination brand, my agent, my ChatGPT, for example, is going to know my loyalty credentials. It knows I want to buy from these places anyway, so it won't even bother looking at anyone else because I have a relationship there that it'll want to focus on. So different different suppliers, different brands will have very different challenges to contend with. We're all going to face similar technical challenges around structuring our data, our APIs, our inventory management systems, making sure that's all harmonized and seamless and integrated. And then on the other side is, how do I actually just get found by agents, and for what reason? Am I being found because people are always going to come to buy from me for my product, or are they typically coming to me to find the bundles because of, again, I'm a PB tech and I can offer good value for a laptop, a screen, and a mouse, for example, that perhaps the supplier couldn't offer, or compared to another competitor, they can't match. So the way that businesses and brands will go to market and where they sit in the food chain will change. The types of data that they should want to be surfaced and be found for, their strategy will change around that as well. So their whole business strategy is basically going to move as not only e-com becomes a bigger slice of their revenue, but also agentic commerce becomes a much larger slice of the revenue, as more and more people turn to conversational commerce to find products, go through the research process, buy, etc., etc. So hopefully that is useful. I'm going to leave it there. As you can see, it's a space to go very deep into. The two protocols are worth taking a look at, getting familiar with where they're going, what they're building for, and then starting to understand what is that preparation work that needs to be done by any business to be found by agents, not even just those who are worried about people buying their product through a website. Any business needs to be thinking about how it is being found by agents for the research process at a minimum, especially B2B. Especially, there'll be a lot of businesses out there who will say, I don't need to think about AP2 and ACP or any of these other agentic commerce protocols. What they're forgetting is that only 5% of buyers are in market at any time for their product, more than likely on average. I think the number was 60% of buyers are coming to vendors, 60% prepared, I think the number is. Back in the day, they have done their research, they've got information, they've already made the decision basically, and then they finally approach the vendor or supplier pretty well equipped and knowledgeable on the product. That percentage is going to be far higher moving forward, because the barriers to knowing enough about a product back in the day were, apart from internal politics and decision making, tend to be time. You just didn't have access to that information. But moving forward, big B2B businesses that are really smart will put as much information as they can online about their product, their service delivery, how they operate, so that when I send out an agent to do a deep research project to find me a new piece of software or a new supplier for product X, that it comes back with a really robust report. For any vendors who haven't provided that information, who haven't thought about their agentic commerce strategy moving forward, they will not be in consideration. So what we'll see is we'll see a two-speed economy starting to appear in the short term. You'll have those that prepared for agentic commerce from day one, and they'll be ready to rock when this continues to kind of proliferate and grow over the next 12, 18 months. It's already happening, but it's just going to take off more and more as more people come online to ChatGPT and start using the capabilities that are available, you'll have those that are ready and just always in consideration, and they'll just start to see the fruits of their labor, of that effort. There'll be others who just will not move, and they'll just rely on the tried and true approach, which would have served them well for a long time. But as new generations come into the market and the business wants to continue its succession plan and build itself into a strong going concern, new buyers buy differently to the way their old customers have bought, which means that the business needs to think differently about how it shows up online and is found online. So hopefully that was interesting. Always up for feedback, questions and thoughts on the topic. Shoot me a DM if you need to.